So what? Where did Lee surrender?
At the dude's house.
At the dude's house in Appomattox.
Yes.
The dude. By the way, I think I told you before, where does the term dude come from?
Cowboys.
Good guess. Close. Very, very close. At the turn of the 20th century, there were people in the city who want to kind of try to act like a cowboy. So they would go to, and they would act like one, but they were, so city slickers who acted like a cowboy. So it was mocking him, calling him a dude, making fun of him. So that dude. Where was the cemetery? Lee's old house. Where was that cemetery? Which become the most hollowed ground. Say it again?
Arlington.
Yeah, that's Arlington. If you get a chance, go to DC. We'll take a field trip. We'll go to that. It's something I would say everyone should go to, but I think everyone should. It is kind of a long field trip. And let's see what else. Oh, who assassinated Lincoln? Yeah, who? Who became president? And what party was Johnson?
Democrat.
Yeah, so that's a big shift. And oh, where did Lincoln say? What was the speech he gave? Not the Gettysburg Address, the other one, where he talked about reconciliation, but also said there's going to be Reconstruction. Yeah, that second inaugural address, well, that's the great mystery. In fact, that's one of the most tragic what ifs in American history. What if Lincoln wasn't assassinated? Who knows how things would have been different? And the Republican Party is going to make a huge shift in about 15 years after this. Massive shift in priorities and what the party's going to stand for. Would have made the same shift with Lincoln if he was still alive. I mean, it's so many what ifs. It's pretty dramatic. So let's finish with the Gettysburg Address. So we talked about, the document. What document?
Declaration.
What? It's gonna. I can read how I worded the question. Yeah, what is it testing? What kind of country is the United States? What kind of country?
Equality.
Yeah, which comes from the Declaration of Independence. Are we going to finish what the Founding Fathers started? And did we get the last full measure yesterday? Didn't we just start and talk about the guy who lost his arm?
Yeah.
Oh, the bell rang.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about that is, and I mentioned how, like this much distance between being killed and living. Why? Yeah, pure chance. So was that person giving the last full measure? Because the bullet just happened, or the piece of shrapnel, whatever might be hit here or not here, or not here. Did he give the last full measure? Because he very well could have died right there. It's pure chance that he lived, the man next to him might have been completely killed, and the person right there, no at least physical harm at all. The thing about last full measure, especially in modern war, but it's that willingness to do it. You put your life or what you are, your essence, your reputation, who you are on the line for that cause. If you put down, they died, which, yeah, I'm not taking points off of that here. Don't worry, I'm not. But it means more than that. It's the willingness to do it. Because he very well could have died. And modern war especially, it is just pure random chance who lives and dies. I mean, the humans who fight they're pretty much just numbers. It's very dehumanizing. And you can be the best, bravest soldier in the world, and if a shell explodes next to you, you're vaporized. You're gone. And the biggest coward might survive and make it all the way through and get a medal. So it's really dehumanizing effort. So let's get to the last question. And by the way, did I tell you this yesterday? You're going to have to answer the Gettysburg Address on the Bible. So the Gettysburg Address can be used for two of your choices for the semester text, either the Civil War or Reconstruction. So you can use it for either one. But for one of those, you have to answer your short ID, 3-sentence short ID on the Gettysburg Address. Sound good? I want that one done. So you can do it either for the Civil War part or for the Reconstruction part. Yeah.
For the Civil War part, how would you say that this led to, like, ending the
Oh, this would be why the war is being fought. So it's just addressing, this is what, so this is going to give the cause to the war. And for Reconstruction, this is showing what Lincoln was thinking about the Civil War. But then he died. So we don't know what he would have done. I still can't get over how much Lincoln evolved. From being, I don't want to touch slavery, but if we do, we'll send slaves to Africa, to all men are created equal. It's pretty remarkable. War radicalizes people. And then let's get to that last question. Why is this war being fought? And that's the meat of the question. When I want you to do this short ID, I don't want anything about, even though I find it interesting, no one listened to the speech, why give the dedication to the cemetery. Yeah, it's a great story. But the meat of it is Lincoln's justification for the war. More importantly, what kind of country he wants, his vision of the country is going to be. Or at least what he's telling the American people, what he thinks they want to hear in the North. So why was this war being fought? Let's go through the steps. Why? And I basically lay it out in those questions before. What's this war for? First off, what do we got to do first? The war is to do what? To preserve what? Even before equality. The Union. So we've got to save the country. We've got to win and save the country. This entity here, so we've got to, it's not enough to say equality. We believe in equal rights. No. Equal rights are meaningless if we don't have a country. So we got to win the country, dedicated on the principle of what? Equal rights, equality. Exactly. But is that just all it said? I love how Lincoln says he's going to free the slaves. He doesn't say that exactly. But what does he call freeing the slaves? He has a great term for it. You catch it? Did you say it? Yeah.
Was it when you talked about having the people not die for anything? Like having them die.
You're getting close to it. That's for the values. But keep reading on past that. That's it. A new birth of freedom. I like that. That's a cool way of saying it. A new birth of freedom. So we're going to have, we're enslaved. We're going to bring equality to all American men. And what kind of government are we going to have? What are those last words? Look at the last words. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What kind of government do we call that? Somewhat of a democracy, yes. That's the kind of country we're going to have. It's not enough just to have borders. It's got to be for something bigger. Or why else would 1 million people die? So we're going to finish who started. Yeah, the Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence. We're going to finish all the way back to them. Remember, he starts at 87 years ago. That's what he says now. We're going to finish the Declaration of Independence. That's why he uses that. The Founding Fathers said, a country based upon equality, we're going to do it. By the way, did they do it? But the last thing is also really important. All these things tie together, doesn't it? But remember the last full measure? If we do not, we as citizens of the United States, so I mean it. If we don't have a country based upon equality, who have we let down? He says it. Who have we let down? Or they died in vain. Everybody at that cemetery has died in vain. Everybody who fought in the Revolutionary War has died in vain. Everybody who died in every war, or in anything fighting for rights or equality, have died in vain. Their life was meaningless because we let them down. So that's why I wanted that question. It ties all together. A country based upon the ideals of the founders, where all men are created equal. And if we don't achieve that, we've let everyone who died down. By the way, is the war over then? Now, you might say, hey, we have completely equal rights now. Or you might disagree with that statement. But just imagine we do live in a country this idealized version of everyone has equal rights. Can those rights be taken away? What happened after Reconstruction? The rights were taken away. I've already mentioned this for women. In most states, or most northern states, women with property could vote in 1800. They could not vote in 1830. Rights could be taken away. Is the war over? It's never really over. Boy, is it easy to get complacent. I mean, we have a country where there was an insurrection a year ago against a democratic election. Rights can be taken away. Yes, it can happen. So that's what Lincoln is talking about. By the way, that's why I like that speech so much. Because it's not this flowery speech. He wrote it for newspapers. Quick read. Isn't it? It's clever. But also, he lays out his vision, but he ties it to the history of the United States. And also lays it out very clear. We got to keep doing this, or they've all died in there. We have to keep this strong. Especially if you believe more than just men should have rights. So with that, let's get to Reconstruction. Good speech. We should memorize it, each of you, and then one by one give the speech in front of the student body of the next assembly. That was Emma's idea, and I thought it was a great idea. I didn't do it in front of my class in third grade. And that scared me to death. So, Reconstruction. So what does this mean? Reconstruction. Well, the video did a great job covering a lot of things. I want to fill in a couple blanks, so I'll do that today and a little bit tomorrow. So what was it? It is to rebuild. You know, there was destruction in the South, but also destruction in the North. And not the way you might think about it. Regiments are being recruited in areas, like in a neighborhood or a town. And if a regiment of young men is recruited from one little neighborhood in New York City, and that regiment just happens to be the lead regiment at, let's say, Cold Harbor, how many young men are going to come back home to that neighborhood? And so, yes, 1 out of 10 men died, which is unbelievably high, but it's not even. And in some little towns, little areas, little neighborhoods, many more. And some neighborhoods, not near as many. So the rebuilding goes all around. They'll start calling this in a way the lost generation, but most people associate that with the generation after World War I, for obvious reasons, because it's even more extreme. Also, what about those Confederate states? They got to be allowed back in. So some kind of idea that their entire economic system is going to be rebuilt, the old political structure will have to come apart if they're going to be reintegrated into the United States. They can't come back in the way they were before. By the way, I love this from the New York Times. Death blow to treason. It is interesting how they would talk about the war in 1865 compared to how they're going to talk about it in 1900. Or for that matter, even when I was in college. But here's the biggie. It was, and I put down noble, it also implies my bias. I'm very much biased towards equal civil rights. But for everybody, so I'm telling you my bias now, but it was to provide equal rights. But the reason I put that capitalized is that can't be forgotten. They really tried. They made mistakes, but they tried. But it didn't quite work. They abandoned it. It was abandoned. The forces against it were too, a better way to look at it is too determined compared to the North. So there's going to be two efforts. Presidential Reconstruction, that's President Johnson's Reconstruction, and then Congressional Reconstruction. Now, everybody puts the end date in 1876. It actually, you could see elements of this well into the 1880s, but, you know, it was basically formally over. One more thing you have to add. When Congress took over and forced the President to act, at least President Johnson, then a more favorable president under Grant, Write down the word radical next to this, because this will also be called radical reconstruction. And you might see this on, like, say, the AP test. And I might even write it down and not realize it on something for review sheet. Congressional or radical reconstruction. Now, radical is, it's a radical thing if you believe that at least all men should be equal. That's considered radical. And so, I'm going to see how far this goes. The counts here. I'm going to see where she quits on this. So, a couple things we'll fill in the blanks from the video, which I thought, like I said, did a great job. Let's get to the 13th Amendment. I got to tell a couple things about this. The 13th Amendment would be, okay, ratified in December 1863. But here's the thing about an amendment. It requires 2/3 of the House and the Senate, and the President's signature, then 3/4 of the states. 2/3 of Congress, 3/4 of the states. Meaning, how often is there going to be a congressional amendment? There hasn't been a meaningful one ratified since, what, 1971? And there's no way, I couldn't even imagine an amendment to say that puppies and kittens are cute. We all must accept that. That wouldn't even make it out of Congress now. So it's really hard to ratify. So this is a big deal. It ended slavery and involuntary servitude, except for prisoners. Prisoners can be enslaved as part of their punishment. So you can imagine what's going to happen. Soon they'll be rounding up a people as prisoners, and then they would literally be sold to farmers or factories or railroads who do slave labor. And does this still happen today? Yes. Especially in states in the South. But it happens all over. Montana, the Constitution of Montana says they have to be paid, but they're paid almost nothing. What is it? 40% of the firefighters in California are prisoners. They're prisoners, and they're paid almost nothing to risk their lives as self-ladders. So, that's a big hole, as you might guess. Also, it was at this time, it's about the same time, so people associated with the 13th Amendment, so I want to make sure I put it in here, but it's now going to be a national holiday, federal holiday. It's called Juneteenth. And this is, it represents June 19th, 1865. And even though it's before the ratification of the 13th Amendment, it's supposed to memorialize the ending of slavery. And what happened was, when former slaves, now free, actually, they didn't know they were free, but when Union gunboats finally took Galveston, Texas, on June 19th, and they were informed, you're free. They had a massive party. They called it a Jubilee on June 19th. And that became kind of an informal holiday of freedmen, especially when Reconstruction ended. It's kind of a way to remind themselves of freedom. So though you see it tied with the 13th Amendment, but the 13th Amendment wasn't quite ratified yet. But the Emancipation Proclamation was. It said nothing about rights. It never said there'll be citizens, voting, rights to travel around the country, the rights to leave the plantations they lived on, no rights. So that's the 13th. I know the video covered it briefly, but I wanted to make sure you get about the punishment of the crime in Juneteenth. This was a great achievement for the Republican Party. Part of the reason they get it passed is they got past more conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats in the North, and there were no southern states in yet. And one other thing I have to mention, because the video covered this, but I have to tell you just a little bit more. The Freedmen's Bureau. So the Freedmen's Bureau over there, they set up schools. Education was such a key issue with this idea that part of equality was to be educated and have your children educated for a chance for a better life and to become the blessings of citizenship. A little bit of food, a little bit of protection. But it was always really, really small. Just minuscule. The education part was big, but after that, nothing more. And Southern whites fought against this tooth and nail. And the Army basically did this. And this is a cartoon supposed to say that they'll step in against the two sides, Southern whites and freedmen. But what else besides freedom and then eventually citizenship were former slaves did? What else? For their work, for their life being taken away, for being enslaved, kidnapped and enslaved, to work for other people's wealth, literally with their blood. No, got no land. Good answer. Remember General Sherman had this in the video? How Sherman gave land right here after he took Savannah? And what happened to that land? It was taken back and given to the former landowners. They never got land? Nothing. Like that. Anything else? Nothing. To this day, nothing. Nothing as payment for what they went through. The hell that of slavery. Not a thing beyond citizenship. I'm not saying that's not an important factor, but it's kind of remarkable if you think about it. Literally nothing in payment for the hell that we can't even comprehend. And I should add, the Fifth Amendment says there can be no takings of people without just compensation. And their literal life was taken away. Nothing. To this day. And no, I don't know the correct answer to that, but it's absolutely remarkable. Looking back at it, knowing what they went through. Well, why else do I mention the Freedmen's Bureau? Everyone got nothing. I mean, I want to make sure you understand that. Nothing. I can imagine if that happened to me and me not wanting something. Wow. I'm a citizen. I got nothing for being kidnapped and enslaved and beaten and tortured. And my children sold away. Wow. But here's something else. I did that to my other mouse and it broke. I've broken a lot of mice. But the Southern white view of this, they wanted to desperately discredit the Freedmen's Bureau as a way to get them out and basically go back to it, as they see it, as much as the old way as possible. So they try to discredit it by saying, if you give them, former slaves, food, they're quit working, they're lazy, they're good, or they're dangerous or will commit crimes. So here are two cartoons, contemporary cartoons from that era, showing this view. So here's the Freedmen's Bureau, and what do? They're lazy, they won't work anymore, and just live off all of that food they get from the Freedmen's Bureau, which wasn't very much, but that's what they said. Because they're lazy, they won't work unless you make them. Or, this one is even more horrifically racist. Remember those horrible pictures of Sambo I showed you? See the face? And this is, they're loafing with money from the Freedmen's Bureau, which, by the way, there wasn't any money, just a little bit of food. But people know, okay. But, well, who's doing all the work? Do you see it right next to him? Which is clearly a white man there. While blacks loaf. And this concept of there's nothing, you're giving money to lazy blacks. They mentioned that in the video. But the reason I wanted to bring this up here is because where does that idea come from? The idea, people from these people that have been taken from Africa are really being brought here because they are savages and we are civilizing them. And either they will die because of starvation or turn to crime. What is that philosophy? And this is exactly the positive good theory. Did that sound familiar once I started saying it? And that's why I want to tie it in together. This concept of race and racism after the Civil War, because this is by definition racism, is directly from the positive good theory. And racism as we know it came out of slavery in the colonies. And it is not a natural or normal thing, and it would be used after the war to discredit Reconstruction and try to reestablish the old rule, which would turn out to be white rule. And this rhetoric would be used for a very long time. Long time. One more thing we have to mention. Carpetbaggers. So carpetbaggers then would be these northerners who'd come south. Carpetbaggers literally cheap luggage where you get a square of carpet, turn the sides, put a latch on top, and you have cheap luggage. Eventually it become a style, really cheap luggage. Well, Southern whites would say, and you notice I put down Democrats because they're all going to become Democrats just about. I don't know if my battery's gone or I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having a little trouble today. There are mostly from the Freedmen's Bureau, but there were some speculators. You know, Southern or Northerners with a little bit of money, they could buy up land cheap because everybody is so broke in the post-war South that was destroyed. But this is from a textbook. This is a picture from a textbook. It's a little poem. But it's one of those cartoons, and it's from the 1970s. It's a junior high American history textbook. And it says, here's a carpetbagger stealing money, you know, it's his suit, stealing money from the fallen South, a veteran. And it says, carpetbaggers, it's pitifully plain, use Southern defeat for personal gain. There were some that did. For the most part, though, it was a way to discredit any federal action to help slaves by calling them carpetbaggers. That's where the term comes from. And that term is still used today. You might hear it occasionally here. If somebody refers to a carpetbagger, it's a term of, it's an insult, a term of diversion. And the whole idea of it is, it's basically somebody from out of state comes into your state. Usually what it is somebody with a lot of money comes in and, you know, buys up land and maybe gets elected to office, but they have a lot of money and they come into, let's say, Montana. Montana is a good example of that because we have a lot of people that come in who make a lot of money in other states and then, you know, buy up land and then kick people off. That happens in Montana. Now, if other people who don't have a lot of money to come in, that wouldn't be necessarily a carpetbagger, but the whole point is that's used to people with a lot of money to come in and buy up the state. Sometimes that term is used by people just to keep out people want to come into the state of Montana, which annoys me, but it can also be used to talk about people who are incredibly rich coming in and buying the state. And if you go to Bozeman, you might know what I'm talking about and see you know why some people call them carpetbaggers. Or they buy themselves elected office because they have a lot of money in a state that doesn't have a lot of money, like Montana. So, with that, let's get to presidential reconstruction really fast. I know the video covered this, but I'm going to get a couple facts in. The video never covered this part. President Johnson, and there was a loop game where you'd have two loops, and it's done in such a way that you can kind of put them together and then take apart the magic trick. And this is a pro-Johnson one, putting the North and South together. But Lincoln, during the war, 1863, we did what's called the 10% plan. And this was a wartime proposal. If 10% of the population of a state, well, first off, let's go to this. If anybody gave an oath to the Constitution, regardless if you're a Confederate soldier or not, but you in the state of Tennessee said, I pledge allegiance to the Constitution, that's not what they would say, but just go with me, they get amnesty. What does amnesty mean? Anyone know? Yeah, a pardon. So they wouldn't be arrested for treason. Amnesty is a pardon.
So they swore to the Constitution.
Yeah, swear an oath. And if 10% of a state does that, let's say 10% of, let me throw a state out here. Tennessee does that, they're back in the Union. By the way, isn't that the definition of lenience? I mean, heck, if you committed treason and your choice is, I'm going to be hanged or swear an oath to the Constitution, I'll be free forever, what are you going to do? Unless you're kind of a loon, you'll swear the oath. But this is what Lincoln did. So a lot of the states in, it's a wartime move. He wanted Tennessee into the Union while the war is going on. He wanted Louisiana into the Union while the war is going on to make it look like we're winning. Has everyone got that? It was a wartime move. It was not going to be the post-war Reconstruction. No, we're not sure what Lincoln's plans were for that summer. But there's absolutely no way it would have been this lenient. There's no way. But Johnson said that's what Lincoln did, so that's what we're doing. So Johnson's going to do this incredibly lenient Reconstruction plan. What's going to come out of this? All they had to do now, Johnson said, you write a new state constitution, and what's the new part? You have to agree with the 13th Amendment. You ratify it, put that in, boom. Other than that, minor changes. If 10% do the oath, write a new constitution, they're back in the Union. How long do you suppose it took for the 11 states of the Confederacy to come back into the Union after Johnson announced this in April? You're really close. By July. They're all back in. They started electing former Confederates and like nothing ever happened. They're all back in. It also implied states must say we'll give rights to freedmen. You notice I put in quotations? I think you all know what I mean by the quotations, right? They're not citizens. What are the rights? You have the right to not be called a slave anymore. Go get them. But you can't leave the plantation you live on. Also, so these are going to be governments are going to be called Dixiecrats governments. These new governments, almost immediately. Okay, Dixie, even though it's a northern urban minstrel song, Dixie represents the South, and Crat comes from, they're all what party? They're all Democrats. Because Lincoln's a Republican. And it's so weird, if you know anything about politics today, the Republican and Democratic parties today, but all ex-Confederates, all Democrats. The planter class would once again be in charge, even if there were some restrictions on leading Confederates, but they kicked over. Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, was elected back to his old seat in Congress. He showed up in Washington, D.C. in early September just expecting to be seated in his old seat. The vice president of the Confederacy. By the way, that's why Republicans sent them all back. No, we're not going to allow them. Yes, Congress can kick out members. They don't have to seat you. They're the only ones who can't. Only Congress. And they passed those black codes, which restricted movement by freedmen. It restricted where they could live. They must live on their old farms. It gave them no legal rights. They couldn't vote, couldn't testify in court. Basically, they're what laws again? Except they're not slaves, right? Because they're free. They're very close to, some of you might know this, in medieval Europe. What were the peasants called who were bound to the land? Yeah, serfs. You might have heard that term. They're basically slaves, but they're not called slaves. And the Republicans, I didn't type this in, but the Republicans kicked them all out. And they were furious with Johnson. But this would be called almost immediately the redemption of white rule. In fact, that's what redemption meant. And for the rest of Reconstruction, the goal will be redemption, which means white rule. And those Democrats who will take over will literally be called redeemers, which kind of has a religious meaning to it. You know, the idea is we're going back to the white, holy way it should be. The redemption. So, with that, Congress would respond with the Congressional Reconstruction or Radical Reconstruction. What's the law? The Military Reconstruction Act. Congress is not messing around. And this is going to be the second law ever. The first one was a year before. That overrode a veto. Overrode a veto and will create 5 military districts. The Army is coming in. So for the first 2 years of Reconstruction, General Grant was in charge of Reconstruction. Then he would become president, and it's going to go to Sherman. General Meade is going to be like responsible for a massive area, and General Howard and all. But 5 military districts. And the states have to ratify the 13th, the 14th, and then 3 years later, they added the 15th Amendment. And these 3 amendments basically, in many ways, make the United States today. All the things we think about the United States, about the rights under the Constitution, really come out of these 3 amendments. And all the holes come out of these 3 amendments, as I've already told you. One of them, I'll tell you the other one in a second. Yeah. We'll get to it. We'll get to the 14th Amendment in just 1 second. So, they mentioned in the video, though, of the video of Reconstruction in great detail. That's on you.
That's why I asked.
That's why you should remember, though. But I will tell. So, the military would enroll voters and protect rights. Now, you might have heard the term Reconstruction, or I'm sorry, registration of voters, and you're probably going to miss this election. Most of you are going to miss the next congressional election. Who's going to be 18 before November? We've got a few. Who's just going to miss it?
November 8th.
How's he going to make it?
2 years.
Oh, so close. And you got 2 more years to go? You'll get there. Register will come about in 1900. 1900. That's when the term registered, but then it was called enrollment. So the military has taken over. But the vote was implied, but not guaranteed. So that's going to be an issue down the road. That's why there'll be a 15th Amendment. Now, Southern whites would view this as, now when I put down Southern view, I did it for space. I meant Southern whites. Obviously not the Southern view, because there's a lot of people who are not white in the South who are actually very overjoyed by this. So Southern white view. The Southern white view is, this is an invasion. And you're going to get this mythology that's going to form in the 1880s and 1890s. That the North started the Civil War just so they could do this. Have Reconstruction and enforce black rule. Which is mind-boggling if you know anything about the era. But you know what? If you don't know, maybe you'll believe it. If people don't know their history, you can convince them of anything. But I can tell you the 14th Amendment would allow for all of you to give me Kit Kats whenever I demand it. Sucks. Okay, so, oh, by the way, I love this. This is supposed to be a pro-Reconstruction, and here's the edifice of the country, see the map of the eagle, and all these columns are supposed to be the states just coming into the Union. So this is pro-Reconstruction, and these are all the founding fathers, and I find this hilarious for lots of reasons. First off, a bunch of guys, but secondly, here's Washington and Lincoln, okay, except for Lady Columbia. Who's that? That's Calhoun. That just made me laugh so much. For Reconstruction, you have Calhoun and Henry Clay, who he wanted to hang. Okay, moving on. So those are the various military districts. The first number is when they would be allowed back into the Union. The second number is when the military left. So South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana would be the last ones. And then they could govern themselves as states. And you know what's going to happen. So with that, let's go swimming, because it's supposed to be in the 40s today. And I just found out, this is from these are coming back. Okay, I was looking for something completely different, and I found swimsuits from 1900 by mistake, and I thought that picture is awesome, so I'm going to show you that picture. This is what it should be, right? So when we take our field trip to Cancun, that's how we're going to dress. That's me. Moving on. Here's the 14th Amendment. And this is the most important part of the Constitution. And don't forget, they wrote the 14th Amendment because laws can be changed. But as I said before, it's almost impossible to change the Constitution. Right? So this guaranteed civil rights to everybody. What does that mean? The Bill of Rights applies to the states. Before 1867, the Bill of Rights only applied to federal territories or federal law. And to this day, we rarely have any connection to federal law. The only laws that matter to us are state or local. Federal law rarely affects us, unless you're doing something like flying over state borders or kidnapping. Kidnapping is a federal crime. Don't kidnap people. You don't want to go alone. So with that, now the Civil Rights Act of 1866 did this. That was overruled. That went over President Johnson's veto too. But this basically enshrined it into law. And so, government cannot infringe on your right to freedom of speech or religion or assembly. That didn't apply to the states until 1867. So for that matter, to Montana, to you, or no illegal search and seizure, or due process of the law, or no cruel and unusual punishment. Did not apply to the states until then. That is why this is the most important part of the Constitution. This is the meat of the Constitution. This is the part of the more, using the term for the era, the most liberal element of the U.S. Constitution, by far. Liberal as in guaranteeing people rights. That's what the term liberal means. Liberal comes from liberty. So with that, it also said everybody has equal protection under the law. That means due process of the law. So the law technically must apply to everybody equally. I use the word technically because I think we all probably know of examples where it doesn't apply equally. But this is where it says under the Constitution. No, it doesn't quite apply to you equally yet. It could be both a good and a bad thing for you. But it will soon. Big part. Also, it's for citizens. Therefore, what's a citizen? If you're born in the United States. Because all those black codes said you cannot be a citizen unless your parents were citizens. Well, slaves weren't citizens. So their kids won't be citizens, and therefore their kids won't be citizens, and so on and so on. So the United States got rid of that by making it cut and dry. Now, I'm going to be clear about it today. That's the way it is. And I think I mentioned this before on Tuesday. But anybody born in the United States is a citizen or has the opportunity to become a citizen. But they cannot apply for citizenship until they're 18. And there are a lot of hoops to go. If they're born in citizenship, if they're born in the United States and their parents were not citizens. If your parents are citizens, you're automatically a citizen. So it's not quite 100%. Does that make sense? And so, for example, my nephew, who's German, in fact, they're flying out tomorrow to Berlin, he was going to come in and then never did. I was going to have him teach. He's 13. He, since his mom is an American citizen, he's an American citizen, and he's a German citizen. Anybody dual citizen in here? Let's watch somebody who's a dual citizen. Nobody? And my other nephew in Italy, he's a dual citizenship, Italian and in the United States. Boy, what a cosmopolitan life I lead. And yet it shows by teaching high school in Helena, Montana. Yeah.
Is it possible to gain citizenship in every single country?
Technically, yes. Logistically, never. So, what else? Well, we're going to pay back that debt. The U.S. incurred a huge debt during the war. And southern states could say, we're not going to pay taxes because we weren't in the Union during the war. No way. We're going to pay the debt. Now, a country that controls its own currency like the United States today, paying the debt's not that huge of a deal. The big thing is the taxes are the big deal. I will explain to you down the road why it's not a big deal about that, so don't worry. Oh, what of women? Well, it makes it very clear what a citizen is. A citizen, it says all citizens, all people, it says all persons born. And then later on it says men. So men are citizens. So women are not quite citizens under the 14th Amendment. So therefore women are not quite guaranteed civil rights. And women aren't quite guaranteed due process of the law under the 14th Amendment. Is it like that today? Yes. Women are not guaranteed equal rights and are not equal citizens under the 14th Amendment and therefore the United States Constitution. I know what you're thinking and I agree. That's only about 53% of the population. So what's the big deal? Good one. Moving on. It's mind-boggling, isn't it? It's absolutely mind-boggling. And even though there is a law, the Civil Rights Act of '64 is the most important law that says women cannot be discriminated against based upon sex, laws can be changed. Now, the state of Montana has women as equal under their constitution, which was written in 1971. Montana was a significantly different state in 1971 than there. But that's in front of the Constitution. But it's not in the federal law. There was an effort called the Equal Rights Amendment to guarantee women equal rights in the 1970s, and missed by 2 states. Would it pass today?
No.
It wouldn't get out of Congress. In fact, in the Senate, it would be a 50-50 tie. Wouldn't even get passed. Would it pass in Montana today? Not a chance. Not a chance. It's kind of mind-boggling that over half the population aren't guaranteed equal rights. By the way, I hinted at it before, but that's why. And since most of the class are there women in my class?
Oh, yeah.
You want to come?
Tough.
Right now, we wouldn't have to see you. And this one. Honestly, the new one is it nails?
So like you just break the boat, but we're not
Yeah, that's why you're but you know, once that's there, I mean, there are reasons why women make 78 cents on every dollar a man makes.
I'll go down for like.
Because it's there.
Well, I'm gonna go down there first. Alright.
Is that your dad?
No.
And then it was about once you say half the population, and that includes men, white and the. Oh, thank you very much. White and.
Oh, I saw that. Oh, that's a great annotation.
Yeah.
Wow.
It makes it easier
A lot of
to
mine are
basically
just say like that's racist.
Bro, I agree because I saw
I don't
saw
mind.
that and
Everybody,
like I was
everybody
like,
cover that.
oh,
Yeah,
is
that's
that
right.
what you were calling it? It's just like, is that also the other thing for our society?
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
Is that why that it was never even honestly like that? Because then, like you said, they put opportunities to end right away.
Yeah.
As a society, since it's a patriarchal society, we don't like that.
And women, you know, it's like women have certain roles in society. And if you say women are equal, they would lose out. Do you remember the Domus Decision?
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, it's weird because it's like, it's not, I mean, it's not as obvious today, but it's, since it's so part of our history, like ingrained and like, it just the system.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I mean, it's still apparent. I mean, we have all these acts and laws, but they're going to be approved. So, you know,
It's weird.
it's weird to think.
Well, and they wanted to stop people from teaching that kind of, but I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
that could be illegal. And on that happy note, have a good weekend.